I'm Alice Hewitt and I am here with Craig Pearson for 5 Minutes With. Craig, you hold a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's degree in communication studies. What inspired you to take on these courses?
Well, I've always been a big believer, first of all, in education. So I think that anytime you take courses in whatever you're interested in, you're going to become better at it quicker. Also, I just like the idea of a personal challenge. I've done that with my job. I've done a lot of exciting things because of the job. And I thought, hey, let's do it with academia as well. And I'm really glad I did. I've never regretted it. And I don't know anybody who's ever regretted getting a degree.
Perfect. You've covered many beats from news to entertainment to court, where you just were today. What beat is your personal favorite among them and why?
Well, that's a good question because it depends on what we're talking about. But I'd have to say for the lifestyle, had to have been covering arts and entertainment because my job was essentially to, go to shows and concerts and parties and basically have fun and write about it. So I loved doing that. However, I did get on front pages often, and in terms of being a writer, all writers ultimately, whether they admit it or not, they want to be read, and I agree. What's the point of writing if it's not to be read, with the exception of, say, journaling or something like that. But in any case, so I like being on front page, and covering news gives me an opportunity to do that.
Okay, and what are some notable events or topics that you have covered in the past?
I have to say that my single favorite assignment I've ever done was war corresponding. So in the summer of 2009, I was a war correspondent for CanWest, which is now Post Media, the largest newspaper chain in Canada. And it was unbelievable, the things that I saw and I did while doing that. I mean, war corresponding is considered the pinnacle of journalism. And we had, everybody from Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather and Bob Woodward and even Winston Churchill have written about war or been war correspondents. So it was amazing. It was crazy dangerous, though, I have to say. And I met people who later died. I was at places where there were firefights. I had bombs landing near me. In fact, I was at a forward operating base, and a missile landed about, 20 meters from me. And it happened to be on Canada Day. And the weirdest thing was, I was sitting there writing, and I heard this whistling, and I saw these curly cues of embers go up. And I thought for half a second, is this something to do with Canada Day? Because we were on a Canadian forward operating base. But of course, there was pandemonium after that, and people running, and a building was destroyed, and it was not that at all. And, it was just amazing. But I have to point out how dangerous it was to say that the reporter that replaced me, not immediately, but shortly thereafter, was Michelle Lang, a reporter from the Calgary Herald, and she was killed doing the exact same job I was doing. She had talked to me just days before she went. We were discussing it. She said she was nervous. I've always really felt bad about that. It's something I can't get out of my mind, talking with her before she went and she dying in that same job I did. But that's something that I will never forget, war corresponding for sure.
And you also teach at the University of Windsor. How important is it for you to pass on your expertise to a younger generation?
I love passing on my expertise to a younger generation. I don't know how much they like hearing it. I like to think they like hearing it, but it's great. And I find that especially when it's somebody who's actually interested in journalism as opposed to, say, taking a course because it sounds like a cool course, I find that those students are typically the best students that I have, because you know what, they not only read media and follow it, but they have an interest in wanting to get better, so I enjoy teaching them the most.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And you also use Twitter to express the news. How important do you think it is for newspapers to use social media?
These days I think it's critical because everybody's doing it, and in fact, some people say that the web is the death of newspapers, but I say it's the exact opposite. In some ways it's the savior, because long ago it used to be newspapers breaking the news, and then for the longest time it was radio and even TV breaking the news because they could do it quicker. But now with websites, everybody can break the news, and now it's more about who has more reporters on the street. And as it turns out in Windsor, Ontario, as is the case with most cities, the daily newspaper, the Windsor Star, has more reporters out there. So we can break the news. So I just came from court today, and it was on charges being withdrawn in a big fraud case, and all the media were there, and I was literally tweeting that the charges had been withdrawn while I'm holding my tape recorder up in a scrum, interviewing the lawyer and the accused who was free to go. So that's how fast it was. I was tweeting while letting somebody else ask a question while I'm taping it.
Okay. What advice can you offer to the journalists here at the Mediaplex?
Well, I think that the main thing I offer anybody who wants to become a writer is you must read and write a lot. And reading is as important. I can always tell the students who read a lot, they tend to be the ones who write the best. So you have to read and write a lot. And the thing is, it's not just about reading, getting to the end, finished. It's about being a good reader. And that means not just reading a lot, but enjoying it and making note of what is said, how they use the words, what information was put in. And then, of course, obviously, writing. You just got to write and write and write, and hopefully you get better.
Well, thank you for joining us here today, Craig. I'm Alice Hewitt, and I've just spent 5 minutes with Craig Pearson.